name of the building is Ananta, which is infinite, right? And essentially it is a realm of infinite possibilities. Now you just go along this outer ring road corridor. It feels like Silicon Valley right here in Bangalore on this one stretch of the road. A lot of my time in college was spent in the canteen drinking endless cups of chai and figuring out past question papers and figuring out how to get the most marks for the least effort.
I love Gemini and I love the feature where you can just take a screenshot of the question paper and it gives you all the answers. Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here today at the Google campus with a leader that I really look up to a lot, as a mentor, friend and coach for, I think, years together. First, I think, the Google campus in Bangalore is just amazing. We got a very nice walkthrough of the campus. It's beautiful. We'll try to share more pictures of the campus in the podcast as well. But very excited to be here with Guru Bhat, who is the Senior Director of Engineering and the site leader for the Bangalore campus as well. Guru, thank you so much for being here today with us. And I'm very, very excited to do this together. And I'm sure I'm going to learn a little more about you today during this conversation as well.
Thank you, Anshuman. Thank you. And the pleasure and the privilege are all mine. I'm so grateful that you've chosen to do this podcast with me and, that we are able to play host to all of you and your team who come here. So it's a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. Let's talk about the campus to begin with, right? I mean, I feel like the campus kind of really connects with the vibe that, Google generally has of inclusion and innovation.
Yes.
And that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Tell me about the campus in your own words. How do you feel about the campus when you come here every day?
I mean, honestly, I'm really grateful to work here. Every single day when I walk in here, I feel I can't believe the luck that I have had in my life that has ended up with me being here and being able to enjoy this. The name of the building is Ananta, which is infinite,
right?
And essentially it is a realm of infinite possibilities, infinite innovation, infinite potential to impact the world in a positive way. You can look at the word infinite and prefix it to any set of positive outcomes, and that's what the building is supposed to represent.
Yeah,
it's a great location for so many Googlers to come in here and enjoy the best of what Google offers, but also in service of what? In service of humanity, to make sure that the products that we build are the most helpful for the world. And I'm really excited by the possibilities of what can emerge from this building and this set of people working together in the next few months and years.
Totally. And when I think of Ananta, I also look at the Google brand and the Google story so far. I think when you have to search for anything, you just default go to Google. And I think it's like the Ananta of information.
Right.
So, that name really kind of connects very well. But switching gears to Guru, right? Let us talk about Guru. Maybe, like a couple of decades back, maybe more. How was it when you started, your own career and this journey into the technology world from two dimensions, right? Your own aspirations, when you started, from the campus into the corporate tech world. Technology has evolved a lot, right? During these kind of shifts in technology, right? Over time. How was your initial kind of impression working in the tech space, and how has that evolved with the evolution of technology over time?
I think there's no way I can sit here and say that I had imagined that this is where the world would be, right? When I was a young student in college, like many of us in India, when I was growing up, there were only two options. You either did medicine or you did engineering.
Right.
That's the kind of social milieu into which we were born. My parents were no different. I don't think my dad explicitly told me that both my parents are doctors. So he didn't force me to become a doctor. At least that, I'm happy with. But he was very clear that I have to be in STEM in some way or the other. And well, at the time, I'm fortunate to have been born at a time when computer science was an emerging field and everybody was gravitating towards it. So I wouldn't claim that it's any great foresight on my part that led me to choose computer science. I got into engineering. I had a pretty decent rank in my entrance exams, and so computer science was one of the options that was available, and I took it. So I'd say that a lot in my life, has been because of luck, and that is the first evidence of it. But from there to where we are now, I think it's been remarkable to see the different twists that the technology industry has taken. One, we had the mobile era. Then there was cloud computing.
Right.
Now we started off with maybe dipping our toes into AI, and literally overnight, we've seen the world go from a chatbot giving some relatively smart answers to now being able to reason through multi-step logic. It's truly mind-boggling.
Absolutely, absolutely. And tell us about how things have changed for you as a technologist over time, right? When you entered this space, I'm sure you had a version of what you wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
In your career. How far have you come? And what does the goal look like, from where you are today?
This is a very, very nuanced question, and I actually have to think a little hard about making sure that I answer in a way that comprehensively gives all the different nuances, right? I'd say that before I talk about what all has changed or what all has evolved, I'd like to talk about maybe what hasn't changed also, right? I'd say that since time immemorial, the human beings who have succeeded the most are the ones who have paid attention to becoming deep experts in their field, learning the foundational aspects of how the world works, whether it is physics, whether it's mathematics, whether it's chemistry or biology or computer science. I'd say that just because technology has evolved doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of learning the foundations.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice to all young engineers today. Obsess over the foundations because they have never been more important than today.
Yeah.
And so don't be enamored by just the tools that you see around you that are shinier, sharper, stronger, but more importantly, pay attention to the foundations that have led us to build those tools, right? So I think that hasn't changed since time immemorial. I'm a student of history. So I believe that what has stood the test of time is humanity needs to be very obsessed with the foundations, and that remains true today. But from when I started to now, what has changed? I'd say that maybe earlier in my career, like many people, you tend to evaluate success and impact through a few dimensions. How quickly am I getting promoted? How quickly is my resume gaining a sense of heft? How big is my title? Or how successful have I been in being able to acquire a variety of material things that actually one does need in order to have a good life. I'm not judging anybody for those, right? I'd say that where I was then to now, maybe because life has turned out well and I have been able to do a few things, I'm no longer obsessed about those aspects, but now it's more around feeling a sense of responsibility around what does it mean for the world? Like the products that we build, maybe not even the world, the team that I lead. How can I make it a happy team? How can I make them empowered and feel like they are contributing to the world and making it a better place? These are things that probably keep me up more at night than worrying about, okay, when is my next promotion coming in or what is my paycheck going to look like next year? Luckily, I'd say a good life has led to a point where I don't need to obsess over those things anymore. But compared to when I was younger in my career, just like a lot of your listeners might be, I also was there, right? It's not like I was born thinking of only very high concepts and leading life in a way where I think of it as exemplary in any way. I'm an extremely ordinary person. I'm a normal guy who has had extraordinary good luck, and that's what has got me here.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's just beautiful the way you kind of talked about it. Personally, I feel like, some of the problem statements, they may have evolved, right? But the sense of curiosity, right, that one needs to have, when you think of it from a customer perspective, the pain points that they have, things may have evolved, and so the problem statement for them may have evolved.
Yes.
But the pain point and the ability to stay closer to the pain point, right, and really addressing that through the products and services that you create has remained constant, right?
Yeah.
On the same journey, let us talk about maybe a few defining moments in your career, right? Whenever it would have probably happened, things that, you learned from. I'm sure we continue to learn.
Yes.
And you would have probably picked a few kind of challenges that you learned from, or you reflect back and say, hey, I came to this with a very different view, but I'm coming out of this with a very different and enriched view.
Yes.
Tell us something, that kind of has stayed with you from a learning perspective, some of those challenges that you came across, and, that kind of defined the way you lead or the way you kind of approach your leadership now.
Yeah. I think there are many such instances. One, I'm at the risk of maybe sharing, several of my flaws, right? When I was studying engineering in college, I'd say a bulk of my mind space was occupied with how do I get good marks in the exam, and how do I put in the least amount of effort to get those marks?
Yeah.
Which meant that you're always gaming the system in some way. You're trying to look at past question papers. You're doing some kind of pattern recognition on what the questions look like and optimizing so that you've studied the least amount to get the best outcome. The trouble with that is that you're not learning a whole lot. You're just kind of, getting good scores at the cost of real knowledge. And I'd say that a lot of my time in college was spent in the canteen drinking endless cups of chai and figuring out past question papers and figuring out how to get the most marks for the least effort. But when I went abroad to do my masters and I went to the US, I'd say that the kind of diligence and discipline that I saw in some of my fellow students, the sheer passion and love that they had for computer science, that was evident in the way they studied. They were not worried about exams as much as they were worried about becoming experts. That made a lasting impression on me that, hey, I have to measure up to this kind of a standard. That is what I've been missing in my life. So I'd say looking at other people and having that epiphany that I need to be better, I'm grateful that I met such people. And throughout life, I've only met such people. So I'm very happy that if I had met a different set of people, I might have been very ordinary and less than ordinary. Luckily, I've managed to be reasonably okay thanks to all the amazing people that I've met. Now, the other big shift in my own mental, processing happened when I'd become a new manager. And it was a big mental shift for me because I was used to being an individual contributor where a lot of my influence came from being able to be really agreeable and amenable and avoiding conflict as much as possible and getting things done through influence, through likability. And there was one time in my career where one of my managers gave me a very hard-hitting piece of feedback in my annual review that said on all objective metrics in terms of performance, you're doing really well, but I'm still not going to say you're doing well. Because when it comes to resolving conflict, you have a fine-tuned ability to shirk conflict and never confront conflict. And at your level, that is catastrophic for the team because you need to be engaging in constructive conflict to move us forward, not just be agreeable and likable all the time. And I went through the phases of trying to understand the feedback, denying it, blaming him, internalizing it as jealousy, and then finally saying, actually, this makes a lot of sense and I need to change myself. And I'd say that my ability as somebody who has to work with people went up tremendously thanks to being more accepting of conflict as a necessary part of the human condition. Wow. And that was a big pivot for me as well. Wow. The recent one that I have had to contend with is how rapidly AI has changed our lives. I confess, like 3 years ago, looking at it as yet another interesting toy that has come into the world of technology, to now not being able to live without it a single day. And it's not in a dependence kind of way. It's not that I depend on it to write my emails. I never do. I always write my own emails, my own articles, everything. But as a thought partner, I think that the shift has been transformational. I feel like I'm 10xing myself And with every iteration of Gemini that comes in, I'm able to get even more out of it. And that's just been brilliant.
Yeah, and first of all, thank you for sharing, with so much of transparency, right? Your own leadership journey and what shaped it. Feedback is a gift, right? But the way you kind of embraced, that feedback and evolved your leadership style, I think you touched upon something so beautiful around, conflict. I actually look at it as a foundation of trust.
Yes.
I think that if you can, have a healthy conflict, that is where trust is, right? In the absence of trust, you cannot have conflict. So
Correct.
I think it was so foundational for you to kind of embrace that early on in your journey.
No. And I can share one more thing. If this absorption of conflict as something that I welcome in my life and I'm able to deal with was not easy. It felt like writing with my left hand. I'm a right-hander. It felt like I was writing with my left hand all through that time. And thanks to that struggle, I evolved maybe a simple framework for myself, which may be useful to your listeners as well, because I'd say that most conflict, when it goes badly, is a question of ego, because it's a question of my idea is better than your idea. Why is mine better? Yours, the framing itself is different. So I realized that there are 4 C's that are very important to any conflict. One is context. Are we operating on a shared context? Are we talking about the same issue? Frequently, if you start off with an objective analysis of the conflict, you'll find that this context itself is not matching. You are thinking of something else, I'm thinking of something else. We are fighting over 2 things which have nothing to do with each other or are vaguely similar, but they're not actually the same. So one is making sure that whenever I get into a conflict, I state my context very clearly and say, this is the context on which I'm operating. Does it match yours? And frequently, when you have that impedance mismatch removed and you get to the same context, you may find the conflict doesn't even exist. Right. So that's a great way to resolve it. Yeah. After that, it's a question of 3 questions. Is this the right thing for the customer? Is this the right thing for the company? Is this the right thing for our colleagues? These 3 things I think are important in any decision. It could be one of these questions, it could be all of these questions. But if you ask these 3 questions, then it doesn't become a question of is mine better or yours better out of ego, but is mine better for this or is your idea better for this? Right. It's easier to accept it as not a failing, but both of you collectively succeeding.
Amazing. That's a nugget we are going to take. Maybe we can have a separate conversation on that. But I would like to add one more C, which I have learned from you, is around compassion. I mean, I have always looked at you as a very compassionate leader who is very giving. Like even, for us to kind of have this conversation and just, for you to welcome us in the campus, I think that's just amazing. And it is, it's not exactly kindness. It's about, being closer to who you are as a person.
Thank you.
And I feel so lucky to have experienced that with you.
You're too kind. You're just too kind. No, thank you.
And I remember, I think we were both part of the Great Place to Work conference, in one of the summits we were.
You guys used to win all the time in Intuit, of course. You set the gold standard.
So we were on stage, I think, sharing. And that's when I think the first time I kind of heard some of the stories about, your views on leadership, culture. And I always look up to you as someone who's very curious, but also who's a culture builder, a culture of inclusion and a culture where innovation can thrive. Can you unpack that for us? Like, how did that happen? How did that belief system come inside you? Even here, when I was actually with you going around the corners, you're talking about, hey, here is where we kind of, created space for people to come together, huddle, and really kind of have an ideation. How did that come into your leadership of creating this culture of empowerment and inclusion?
I think somewhere long ago, thanks to again watching other really amazing people and how they lead and how they operate and what sparks joy in the world, right? I think fundamentally, I think all of us, what we have to realize is, while we may pay a lot of attention to technology, while we may be enamored by progress in many ways that you see around the world in terms of shiny buildings, great infrastructure, amazing airports, and everything else, bottom line is we are a very social animal. Like human beings thrive because of other human beings. they don't thrive just because of tools or more money or more progress or success. They thrive because they find connection. And creating workplaces that kind of foster that sense of connection and, as you said earlier, trust. Any leader's job is to increase the level of trust within the system. Being able to create an environment where trust is amplified and constantly continues to rise, if you do that, you write yourself out of a job, and that's the best thing that can happen, right? If you can create a culture where trust is ambient and ever increasing, then you don't need to be there anymore. You can go solve some other problems, and it's a hard one to solve. It's a hard problem to solve. So I'd say that part of my ethos has developed from understanding how important it is for people when they walk into a workplace to feel happy. Every Monday morning should not be one that they look forward to with dread. They should be looking forward to it with joy. They should be, in spite of Bangalore traffic, they should be thinking, I want to go to work, right? And they want to come in here. And if you feel like you belong and you feel like, while everything may not be exactly the way you like it, enough thought has been put into making it at least work for you in some way, you feel more giving towards the organization. And with that, your mind space is freed up to do good things for the world. And I think Google tries very hard to create workspaces like that. I can't take any credit for this office, right? It's amazing people behind the scenes who have done like mind-blowingly amazing work to put this together. And their understanding of people and what makes people come together and work well, I can learn every single day from watching them work. So I'd say that what we have here is not so much a result of me in any way, but because Google has amazing professionals who love what they do and know what they're doing. And I learn from that, and I'm happy that it is actually bearing results and fruit the way it should.
Yeah, so true. I think the sense of belonging that you just touched upon, I think it is so underrated in the corporate culture context, right? And both of us have been part of journeys where we have seen large kind of companies really build global centers. And I feel like the sense of ownership, creating that empowerment with the local teams or the global teams is so critical to foster innovation and foster a very inclusive growth for the company. And, I see the reflection of that here. I've seen that, in your other roles also before that. Can you talk about, the growth, that you have seen in Indian context, especially with Indian centers or the global centers or global development centers, so to say, really kind of, accelerating growth for companies, who have probably been in different parts of the world so far, but are really leapfrogging in not just creating value for themselves, but also value for the customer, right, globally. How has that journey kind of unfolded, in some of your experiences in different companies?
I moved back to India roughly about 18 years ago. And again, like, I'm so fortunate to have timed my move back to India at that time, because I feel like the ecosystem here has grown so tremendously during that time that I've had a ringside view into watching it unfold.
Right.
I feel like there are many places around the world that are unique and have their own strengths. I can speak authoritatively to India because I live here and I have grown up here, but there are many places. So this is not in any way to exclude other places from this sense of being exceptional. I'm just saying India is unique in a certain way, right? One, just the sheer demographic diversity. You have a multitude of languages, and language is just an expression of the culture, which means there are a multitude of subcultures within India. While there is a unifying identity as India, hidden underneath that are a multitude of cultures and diverse thought processes. And even 20-30 kilometers from where you sit here, you'll see a different culture, a different language, a different cuisine. I think that mind-boggling array of diversity means that the way people think is also different. India is obviously has a rich and storied history, which has gone through ups and downs in many ways. But here we are today, where the country has seen colonialism, has dealt with it, has benefited as well as has, lost a lot from it. And as a result, the country is very attuned to dealing with constraint. Indians do remarkably well in constraint. And I feel like most innovation happens because humanity finds constraint somewhere and finds a way to get around it. That's when innovation happens. Innovation rarely happens in plenty; it happens in constraint. And India is very constrained in many ways. India is also notoriously, open to inconvenience. They're accepting of inconvenience like no other place I've seen in the world. As a result, like I think there is a natural hunger to circumvent problems, which the world has noticed, and they're beginning to leverage India as a powerful human potential. Right, we have infinite in some sense human potential with the scale of population we have, as well as the demographic dividend that we are reaping in terms of so many young people being here. So much is able to be done out of India because of this complex cocktail of circumstances. Right. You've got history, you've got mindset, you've got diversity, you've got youth, and you've got this innate hunger to do more and progress. For many companies in the world, tapping into this reservoir of unbridled human potential is very attractive. And so over the last 18 years that I've been here, I've seen an explosion. And as a view, right? Yeah. We used to see a few companies. Now you just go along this outer ring road corridor. There are hundreds of millions of square feet of office space. It feels like Silicon Valley right here in Bangalore on this one stretch of the road. And so much happens here that affects the rest of the world. Yeah, and so much of the world's software is built in this building as well as in the other buildings surrounding us. All the big names are here. All the amazing competitors that Google has, they're all here as well, partners as well. So I feel very excited at the prospect of what India can bring, thanks to all the different qualities that make it unique.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's at a beautiful inflection point from, do it for me to, do it yourself. Yeah. I think, we are probably leaning on one side or the other, but now I think there is the tipping point where both coexist. Yeah. And that has given a lot of opportunities for, new companies, startups also in different spaces to kind of come up with really, really wonderful products. And we use them almost like on a daily basis. But the outer ring road does bring a lot of fond memories. I still remember when we used to have conversations, and that's the human part. I talked about, AI, so I'll come to that. But the human part is so important, right? We are part of an effort together where we were trying to build this skywalk for people, and we finally built it, which was used more than 20,000 people used to
dismantled now.
And they're rebuilding it, thankfully. That's right. But it's something that, came to all the leaders, and you all kind of put together a team to really kind of do something which helps people, safely travel from one side of the road to another, right? Yeah. And 20,000 people using it on a daily basis is a huge, huge kind of an advantage, and also a safe way for them to commute, right? So, going back to AI, right? And, from a SeedlingLabs perspective, we've just kind of come up with this whole theme around, how do we create AI native product development with human ingenuity, right? And that's where we are kind of landing. From where you look at it, and you touched upon it a little, right? In the last 24 months, or maybe, 2 to 3 years back, when was that moment that you said, hey, the way AI is kind of shaping is going to change the world? Of course, it has. But there was a moment, right, where a lot of leaders were like, wow, this can happen. Yeah. And so what was the moment for you, right, when you felt like, wow, AI is going to really, really, kind of grow like anything else?
I'd say that for me, maybe it was 2024 where I had this aha moment in some sense. Earlier, so I work as part of the information retrieval team at Google, which is a very core part of the data effort that we have. We bring in all the data from the open web and then also third-party systems, and we power the training data for Gemini as well as for Google Search. We have gone from earlier, when we were looking for information, it felt very like there was some humongous database somewhere, you fired a query at it and you got a deterministic answer, because somewhere hidden in that information was a specific piece of information that would come back to you. Somewhere along the way, other than seeing some interesting next token prediction kind of thing that would play out as emails getting generated, etc., which was impressive, mildly impressive maybe, but not like earth-shattering and mind-blowing. It went from there to actually being able to reason with you and be a thought partner for you. And I had this realization when I was doing, so as a student of history, whenever I give a talk on any deeply technical topic, I still try to weave in some element of history in there because I think the human brain comprehends and understands concepts very well when you can draw analogies to something that has happened in the real world, right? So I had this vague notion in my head that the logistical aspects of life during the time of the Renaissance, along with the sheer flow of information that had to happen, that brought all these people together at one particular period in history that created a revolution, must have had something unique. But it was just a hypothesis in my head. Now, of course, I could have read a lot of history textbooks. I could have drawn parallels between one thing and another, connected the dots, and may have come to some conclusion. But to be able to do it with Gemini in literally 5 minutes, where it felt like I was talking to an extremely intelligent friend who was well versed in everything, right? History, philosophy, economics, science, everything. And it's like a polymath who's available right next to you. And you can give a hypothesis, and that person either says, no, you're talking rubbish, or yes, you're right. And here is how it all happened. And for me to be able to take what was a vague idea in my head and actually build a story around it and produce slides for it end to end, I think that blew my mind that, okay, this is fundamentally different from anything I've seen ever before.
Yeah.
I think earlier information retrieval was about finding a needle in the haystack. Suddenly we understand the entire haystack. We're not just finding the needle. We know every little element of it thanks to AI.
Yeah, yeah. And I love Gemini. It's a default app for me. And I love it because, it is really helping me, kind of have some conversations with my daughter, who is also, a student in humanities.
Yeah.
And I love the feature where you can just take a screenshot of the question paper and it gives you all the answers and ask you follow-through questions also that you want to kind of.
I mean, if you haven't used NotebookLM, you should.
I will definitely give it a try.
Unbelievably amazing product. Yes.
Yeah. And I am just amazed the way, I mean, I would say the youth of today is really kind of embracing technology, right?
Yes.
And I see that in, kind of the way they're approaching anything, right? Whether it is preparing for their lesson plans or, just kind of seeking information. There are probably, shades of that we are still working on how we can make sure that they get the right information, right? When they do those searches. But from that moment where you felt like, hey, AI is going to really kind of radically change the way we kind of look at things, we consume information, we create products, there's probably a bit of like, a kind of a slowdown, right, in terms of, how AI was shaping up, right? And a lot of, resistance started kind of coming, right? Like, hey, I am seeing all these amazing products, but I don't know how to use it.
Yeah.
I'm seeing all these amazing, ways of doing things, but I'm not able to do it, right? So there was a gap, right, between what the opportunity looked like, what I thought it could be, and what it kind of translated for me, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about more from a consumer perspective,
Yes.
from even probably like, developer perspective, or perhaps, a consumer, right, from a larger scope of things. Companies, right, how they were looking at embracing AI and then kind of, creating products.
Yeah.
What what's your kind of reaction to that, right? Being in this particular space, right, at the center, how are you looking at kind of bridging that gap between the expectations versus reality for people? In fact, some people have started talking about, from a kind of era of possibilities. Now we are focusing on the era of performance.
Yeah.
Right. So how are you looking at that space of kind of bridging that gap?
I'll probably caveat it by saying I'm as much a traveler along this road as, while I may have the name Guru, I'm not really a guru. So, I have much to learn on this topic as well. And probably I'm discovering it like everybody else through some mistakes and some successes. I'd say that, again, if you were to go back in history and take a look at humanity has gone through multiple, I would say, pivots that have changed the course of humanity. Initially, there was the cognitive revolution. If you look at, if you read *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, in that he's got a beautifully articulated, I would say maybe it's a theory, but I resonate with it very strongly, right? There have been some fundamental shifts in how humanity has developed. One, cognition was something that we kind of naturally stumbled into.
Right.
And as a result, we developed language, which allowed us to communicate, and the dissemination of knowledge ended up becoming so much easier thanks to this some small switch that happened inside our brains, right? Then came the agricultural revolution, which democratized access to food in some sense. Food insecurity, having to go and gather food everywhere and expending a lot of calories in order to gain calories no longer was needed because you could get it at scale. Then came the Industrial Revolution, etc., etc. And in the middle, there have been other events like the printing press being created. I would say that what is unique about today compared to those times in history, people who were living in those times didn't know they were living in a revolutionary time. Things probably felt different, but the time scale is very different, right? Something happened over hundreds of years, something happened over thousands of years, something happened over tens of years, or 100 years, including the Industrial Revolution. It didn't happen in literally 1 or 2 years like it has now. So in our cohort of humanity is very unique in that we know we are in the middle of a revolution, and so we can be mindful about how we adapt to it. Think about when the industrialization of textiles happened. They were the Luddites who went around breaking looms because they felt like their jobs were at risk. One way of coping with change is to attack the change, to say, no, I will not allow that change to happen. Unfortunately, that throughout history, that's a losing proposition, because for the right reasons, whether economic or cultural or social, if something is right, it will happen. So you fighting it is not going to change. I would say AI is one of those.
Right.
There is no reason to fight it. In fact, you should become like a perpetual apprentice with it. You should try to see if you can constantly learn, accept that you will never know everything, and continue to keep iteratively increasing your knowledge in the hope that you will continue to add value as well as a result of that acquisition of knowledge. So I'd say that for me, dealing with the shift has been to take a beginner's mindset completely. Okay, I'm in the middle of a revolution. What does it mean?
Yeah.
What should I protect? I'd say that what you have to protect is critical discernment. If you should never outsource the ability for you to critically assess something, because that is a right that only you have as a human being. While you may have a new shiny tool, it doesn't mean you outsource all your thinking to that tool.
Right.
You should still be able to see the why and the how, and not just be enamored by the what. What is the output that AI has given you? But you should still be able to think why. And I would say compassion that you referred to is more in demand today than ever before.
Yeah.
Because if you don't build with guardrails, you will see that any new advance will come with the attendant risks. The printing press, when it came up, earlier what would people do? They would be handwriting and copying documents. Suddenly, you have the printing press that can print out lots of good stuff. But what else can print out? It can print out a lot of bad stuff as well. So propaganda, lies, defaming others, all of that also started getting printed out very quickly. It took some time for humanity to calibrate, put some checks and balances, figure out what is right and what is wrong. I'd say that AI has the potential to, I don't know, like 1000x the good and the bad.
Yeah.
So it's up to us to make sure that the bad is suppressed and only the good goes through. So I'd say that, while we are evaluating what to do next with AI, we should be keeping critical thinking completely in our control. We should be, very, very possessive of it. And secondly, we have to think about, is there a user on the other side whose problem we are solving? Then it's a good problem to solve. Just because we have a brand new hammer doesn't mean everything is a nail and we just keep hitting it. So when people use AI to, I don't know, like sound very intelligent writing LinkedIn posts using AI, I wonder, like, what are you doing? Like, you're just outsourcing your critical thinking to somebody else.
Right.
And then at the end, not like anybody is fooled into thinking you're a smart person.
Yeah. And I mean, I can draw parallel to, we are all in love with design thinking, right?
Yes.
As, technologists, as leaders who believe in really solving for the customer. And I think that there's a very core element of that, which I feel is so relevant in
Yeah.
what you shared, is the competitive differentiation.
Yeah.
And I feel like as human beings, we have that in ourselves, right?
Yeah.
That contextual intelligence, that understanding of, the context. And I'm reminded of, one of the CEOs that I had the fortune of working, with for some time, Brad Smith,
Yes.
who would always talk about, in any Intuit context, you talk about context before content.
Yeah.
And it was so powerful, right? The way he could connect, with what is happening in the industry, in the kind of environment, in the own company culture, to what we are doing as
Yeah.
a company in terms of strategy. It was just so beautiful. And I'm telling you, like, you said your name is Guru, but you can also be a very, very, amazing Guru. You have already been in this whole conversation, like, I feel like there are so many nuggets of wisdom that you have shared. In fact, I had some follow up question, but you've probably kind of touched upon most of that. And I feel like if you were my kind of a teacher, I would be much better student, academically. Um, one of the things that I feel has kind of stayed connected even with AI technology and the way people lead.
Yeah.
I think is this ability to kind of understand, read the room, and like create something which is very, very, I would say, harmonious,
Yeah.
where there is technology, where is human ingenuity, and also your own kind of layer of, wisdom, culture, or, leadership that,
Yeah.
every leader kind of brings to the conversation. From that perspective, what would be your advice? And you shared some of that already for people who are maybe there are a lot of folks who are just entering the corporate space today, right? There are a lot of technologists who are looking at how do I take the next big kind of leap for myself,
Yeah.
leveraging technology, embracing it, at the same time kind of developing my own layer of leadership
Yeah.
with it. There are a lot of folks who are kind of starting to experiment with technology, especially AI developers looking at enhancing their productivity.
Yeah.
What would be your, like, a few pieces of advice or suggestion for them to start kind of probing into as they look at creating this harmony of technology, your own human ingenuity, as well as what you are embracing as a very, very unique leader that each one of us probably inherently are?
Yeah, no, it's a very broad question, and obviously I may not do justice to it, but I'd say that uh, I'll start by acknowledging one thing, which is time is the most finite resource that all of us have. And I think a lot of success in one's life comes from marshaling your time as effectively as possible. I'd say that for anybody starting now, especially entering the world when everything is changing so rapidly, be very mindful about how you use your time. You could use it to endlessly scroll social media, or you could use it to learn the foundations of technology and then from there build to becoming an expert at something. Which one do you choose? If you choose the scrolling approach, then somebody else is going to be taking all the decisions and you're just going to be consuming at the end of it. But if you take the other approach, so use your time mindfully is what I would say. One, first of all, right? Second, everything is changing fast. So what you know today may not be relevant in 6 months, or maybe just peripherally relevant in 6 months. Does that mean you just sit around waiting for it? No, you have to jump in and experiment as much as possible, because your understanding of today will actually make you better suited to understand what's coming tomorrow. If you start 6 months from now, you're looking at a much bigger hill to climb. So you might as well start today. So I'd say that you have to start embracing this change and saying everything is changing. It does look scary, but the only way I can deal with my sense of anxiety is by becoming curious and more curious. And what I know very well doesn't scare me. What I don't know very well will always scare me. So your only approach is to go and learn it as much as possible, right? And that's true for even, for example, people who are dealing with critical illnesses. the more they know about the disease, they actually develop a sense of comfort around how to manage it. Not knowing it, everything sounds scary. And this AI is exciting. It's so exciting that it may be anxiety inducing for some people, but yeah, you can only embrace it by learning. One thing that I love a lot is tennis. I'm a huge fan of tennis, and I'm a huge fan of Roger Federer.
Wow.
Right now, I'm sure the listeners amongst your, people among your listeners will be thinking, "Hey, I like Rafa. I love Rafa too, and I love Djokovic too. I like all of them."
And
but
we both love each other.
Yeah, and I think in the end, I think I still put Federer above everybody else because of his artistry. Right now, think of AI as a brand new tennis racket that has come in. In the 1970s, 60s, there used to be wooden rackets. People who were playing tennis at that time thought those rackets were damn good, and they played very well with them. Then came the 80s with graphite and aluminum and all of that, and they still played tennis really well. And then later, now, you've got extremely advanced, titanium and all sorts of composite materials, where the racket technology is so good that people are able to hit shots that were unheard of or unthinkable before, at speeds that were mind-blowing, but does that mean that anybody with a good racket is able to play very good tennis? No. Federer is Federer because he has court sense. He understands every angle on the court. He understands what happens if you slice a ball this way and it spins the other way versus this way. If somebody is running towards the ball like this, what he has to do next. The strategy of what to do, how to control that racket, that new tool, is all his. The game looks beautiful not because of the racket, because of the person playing it. So the same thing with AI. You've got a new tool, but the conductor, the person who's actually orchestrating the beauty around life, is still a human being. So you have to take that role seriously and become really good at it.
Yeah, I love it. I think, I am taking back so many, different kind of methods and, appreciation of things around us, and how you kind of look at all these kind of playing away, a role in what we are kind of learning, right? Whether it is technology, whether it is, leadership. So I think it's been an amazing conversation, Guru. Thank you for being so generous with your time. I always say that the best gift a leader can provide to anyone is the gift of time. So thank you for that gift. I really appreciate your candor, right, and the way you kind of shared not just about leadership, but how you're kind of tackling technology as a technologist, as a leader. What has been your kind of areas of passion, building cultures of inclusion, innovation. I think it's been a masterclass already in leadership for me, in AI, and what comes next for all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anshuman, and thank you most of all, more than anything, for the gift of your friendship. I've been the beneficiary of your friendship, and watching you, the way you've built your career and the number of advocates and sponsors you have because of the kind of capability and competence that you bring to the table. It's been really, really wonderful to watch. I feel so happy to see you thriving and to call you my friend. So I'm very, very happy, and it's a great privilege to be in conversation with you.
Very grateful, Guru. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. I'm sure you have taken a lot of notes already. And we will try to kind of keep these conversations going. Looking forward to hearing from all of you. Please share comments about what you liked, what you would like to kind of see more about. And I'm just amazed, with this just last half an hour that we spent together with an amazing leader in Guru. As I had said in the beginning, I always learn something new. I think I have, learned so much about history that I'm going to look at some of those, portions again, and look at it with a very different, sense of curiosity, the sense of exploration that Guru challenged us to kind of embrace. So thank you again, folks, for listening, and look forward to staying in touch and keeping the conversation going. Thank you again, Guru.
Thank you. Thank you.